I looked at my wife, whom I have been with for 5 years, and said, "Erin, it's either him or me. There's no compromise." She was sitting next to my supposed boss, Plato Janus, squeezing his well-groomed hand until the moment I spoke. When I said these words, she pulled her hand away. Her beautiful face expressed a mixture of embarrassment and fear. She shook her head in surprise, and her blonde hair shone in the lamplight. "At least to the weekend. Everything will return to normal on Monday. Can't you enjoy time with Elle for now?" she asked. Is Los Angeles. Logan, real name Ellen Johnson, was now sitting next to me, and had been trying hard to seduce me for the past few hours. She was an amazing woman with dark hair and one of the most enviable bodies in the world, especially if you appreciate curves like me. There were also rumors around her about her high-classness. It was all part of Plato's joke. When Erin and I were invited to this island for the weekend, it was assumed that he wanted to get to know me better. I'm a famous writer, and he bought a publishing company that released my work about 3 months ago. However, the whole weekend was actually organized by Plato in order to have a relationship with my wife. I'm an average writer writing detective and thrillers with my main character, Rick Rocker. He unravels the mysteries of locked rooms and makes daring jumps from cliffs to evade the madman. There is a variety in his bed life, and it is fascinating. He will easily punish beautiful women. A master of martial arts and a trained killer, he knows everything. He is a fantasy wrapped in a thin veil of reality, and my books are selling well, although the publishing house has several more significant and better-selling authors. I have a gorgeous wife who caught Plato's attention. They crossed paths at a grand dinner and dance organized by Mr. G for his group of writers and editors. This event made an impression on Erin, especially when she danced with Mr. G to a variety of musical numbers. Ready. I will continue to do other writing assignments. From the moment I turned 10, I realized that I was a writer. At school, I wrote story after story, and 2 of them were published in obscure literary magazines during high school. Despite the fact that I considered myself a serious writer, the need to earn a living arose. After graduating from high school, I worked as an auto mechanic, which I really liked. However, the payment was small, which made me start writing thrillers. Surprisingly, one of them sold out, then another and another. My current publisher signed a contract with me after receiving my first novel about Rick Rocker. Sally Baker became my editor, and we quickly found a common language. She was sweet, but deeply attached to her family. She had elementary school children. While working on the second book about the Rocker, I met Erin. I finished the book after receiving advice from her about sword fighting, and our professional relationship developed into several dates, eventually leading to intimacy. Our connection was instant, and we were both thrilled. At that time, Erin owned her own music store, which lasted at the initial stage thanks to loans from the family fund. The store offered various instruments in one section, a variety of music recordings in another, as well as sheet music. So fencing was just a hobby. When we got married, she was 23 years old, and I was happy, as it seemed to me that it was possible to be happy. We had plans for the kids and very soon. But then my publishing company was sold to Mr. G, or as Erin calls him, Plato. One day, Erin came home excited and mentioned that the next weekend Plato invited us to his island. I looked at her and asked why she was telling me about it and not him. Erin explained that she met him last week, they had lunch together, and she took him shopping. Today he called with an invitation, expressing a desire to get to know the writers better. Erin assumed that he would contact me soon. Curious, I asked if he had contacted her and others. She assured me, denying any inappropriate contact. I insisted that she explain why she hadn't mentioned lunch and shopping earlier, and she admitted that he had molested her, but she turned him down. She was silent, thinking that I might get into trouble, given his ownership of the company. Now, with visible excitement about the trip to the island, Erin revealed that it would be just the 2 of us with him and his special friend, as well as the staff, to get to know us better. I incredulously noticed his intentions to get to know everyone better. Erin assured me that she would handle the situation and asked me if I was sure I could handle it. I assured her that everything would be fine. However, I firmly stated that I refused the invitation, considering it too dangerous for us. Erin begged me to reconsider, saying that we would have a great time, but I remained steadfast, apologized for my decision. She frowned the rest of the evening. The next day, I called the main office and requested a conversation with Mr. Jai. He called back 15 minutes later, expressing his expectation of our weekend on the island. I refused, expressing my awkwardness. I mentioned that he seemed to have found out about it from my wife, who had already had lunch with him, and did not tell me herself initially. According to her, he bothered her, and she was afraid of my reaction if I found out everything. He'd expressed his gratitude to Erin in various aspects, noting her attractiveness and entrepreneurial qualities. He also mentioned that I am one of his most profitable writers. He'd expressed a desire to get to know both of us better. Despite all his efforts, I maintained my position, apologizing and claiming that it wouldn't work. He expressed disappointment and said he would like me to change my mind. He said he would keep it open for a week. We broke up about 3 hours later. When I finished the next book about Rick, my agent Brock Levine contacted me. I asked him how he knew about my refusal of Mr. G's invitation. Brock explained that the deputy sales director had called him and insisted on my presence. He talked about the potential consequences of insufficient advertising for the new book, which would be unfavorable for both of us from a financial point of view. I asked if there was a direct threat, and Brock explained that although it was not explicit, the threat was implied, and stressed that Mr. G was playing a tough game. I assured Brock that I would contact him. After the conversation ended, I sent an email to Sally with the final part of the new book and instructions. Later, she called, and we discussed the situation. Meanwhile, I began to explore Plato Janus and his island. The island was called Hedonism, which means pleasure in Greek, basically the island of pleasure. Going deeper, I found many stories of sexual recklessness on the island, including 2 divorce cases where the island was listed as a factor. However, these stories were published in colloquial sources. Several photos of Mr. G with women, including 2 married ones, raised serious concerns for me. Using Google Maps, I located an image of the place and familiarized myself with the entire layout. This island, measuring approximately 2 miles long and 1 mile wide, is situated off the North Carolina coast among popular golf and beach holiday destinations. Facing south, it is shielded from the elements and boasts 2 piers, various buildings, including a large house, tennis courts, and even a swimming pool, which left me puzzled given the great beaches nearby. To aid my exploration, I downloaded detailed photos and created a comprehensive topographic map, realizing that a boat or a seaplane would be necessary for the journey. Although lacking both, I knew people who possessed these means. One Friday evening, Erin returned home in a seemingly joyful manner. While enjoying a substantial chicken salad and white wine for dinner, Erin mentioned hearing rumors about me reconsidering our decision not to visit the island. As she changed, I pondered Plato's idea of changing one's mind. But Erin clarified that the person in question was actually in New York, and we were still in good old Virginia. He had called her and mentioned his apartment in McLean. Confused about how she knew his whereabouts, I was met with a dismissal of my paranoia. Erin explained that Plato suggested ordering a plane from the national airport if we decided to go, but I reiterated that my mind remained unchanged. Frustrated, Erin called me stubborn and suggested she might go alone. However, I expressed concerns about whether I would enjoy myself and fears a potential strain on our relationship. I even questioned the possibility of Erin sleeping with him, to which Erin responded that she would not go without me. Worried about the consequences upon her return and the potential jeopardy to our relationship, I inquired how I could let her go alone. Erin affirmed her attraction, but assured me that we were still a passionate couple and that she wouldn't take that risk. Although I believed her, I must admit my trust in her was almost depleted. During this conversation, a spill of wine led to laughter, hugs, and kisses, which eventually led us upstairs for an hour. The unpleasant topic seemed to fade away as we lay in bed. Erin asserted that she wouldn't risk our relationship for a billionaire, assuming that we were still going to the island, and commented that the decision had been made, without providing further detail. Curious about her eagerness for the trip, I urged her to be truthful. After a moment of silence, Erin explained that it seemed exciting to have the opportunity to communicate with such an important and influential person. However, she quickly clarified that she didn't mean being with him, but rather having the chance to communicate with him. Reflecting on the situation, I recognized that he was born into wealth and had significantly increased his fortune, having a substantial head start. Similar to me, he pursued relationships with women. Despite my concerns, Anne affirmed her belief that everything would turn out well and that we would have fun. Considering that we were on the verge of trying to conceive, I realized that this could potentially be the moment for Erin to stray. Doubting her honesty, I reluctantly agreed to the trip, warning Erin that if she ended up with this guy, it would be a decision with irreversible consequences. She acknowledged my warning while expressing her gladness about our decision. As I saw it, this warning was my final test of her worthiness as a wife. The following day, I accepted his invitation and made contingency plans with my friend. I also checked the island's cellular communication availability, which turned out to be present. Nonetheless, as a precautionary measure, I brought my satellite phone. Our journey began with a small plane from the national airport that landed at a local airport, where we were greeted by a man named Simon. He took us to the pier, where we embarked on a boat with a comfortable cabin and a powerful engine, driven by another man named Charlie. After approximately 40 minutes, we arrived at the island. Aaron and I spent our time exploring the ocean and neighboring islands while Simon briefed us on our location and the activities available on the island. Simon, a friendly and muscular person with a wonderful smile and laugh, was larger than me. As we approached the north side pier, with Aaron leading the way, Simon commented on my apparent lack of happiness regarding the trip and suggested calling me Don. I acknowledged my doubts and expressed that Simon, having worked for Mr. G for 6 years, should understand my reservations. In response to Simon's inquiry about why I came if I was so worried, I explained that I wanted to see what would happen. Curiosity led me to ask if Simon was Mr. G's bodyguard, which he confirmed. However, he mentioned that his presence was merely a precaution, as Mr. G was capable of handling himself. Intrigued by Simon's preparedness, I questioned if he was armed. Simon admitted to carrying a knife, but made it clear that weapons were prohibited on the island. Expressing my distrust of the island's rules, I confessed that I had recently become a not very trusting person. Simon assured me that no weapons were required, stressing that no matter what happened, I would not need anything like that. The boat was firmly anchored to the pier, and Simon and the young man secured it securely. Aaron accepted Simon's help, and I will get off the boat, noticing a little anxiety in Simon's eyes. Following Simon's instructions, I followed Aaron towards the big house. Upon arrival, we were greeted by Mr. G, who was wearing swimming trunks and a sleeveless t-shirt. He was accompanied by Ella, recognized as the most beautiful woman in the world. I looked at her closely, trying to figure out who else would join us. It became clear that this was Helen Johnson from Jonestown, a semi-official sweetheart on the island, and she was also present at several houses owned by Mr. G. Although in the past she was seen in the company of other noble men, this happened less and less often. Mr. G seemed to have entered into an exclusive agreement, at least partially. Mr. G held out his hand to shake, Ella hugged Aaron, and then Mr. G hugged them both. When I hugged her, I could smell her scent when her lips brushed my ear. We were shown into a large room and offered drinks. Despite the fact that it was only 1 o'clock in the afternoon and our light snacks on the plane, there was a small buffet waiting for us. I chose sparkling water and abstained from alcohol, while Aaron chose wine. Both of them tried a small variety of snacks. During this conversation, Mr. G inquired about the new book that I had sent to Sally last week, assuring me that it would be released on time. Mr. G praised my punctuality with a laugh. Ella, who has read all my books, expressed her impatience for a thriller related to mountaineering, small plane flights, and love adventures. She exclaimed, "I can't wait. Maybe I can watch it earlier." Mr. G supported this idea, turned to Aaron and asked about the music business. After Aaron's positive response, I joked about Marjorie's new book, predicting good sales. Marjorie, known as Marjorie Wright, wrote serious literature, but still sold a lot of books. Mr. G, he told me about Marjorie's growing sales and reminded me of my obligations to write the next book, to which I confirmed that I was continuing to work on the Christmas detective story. Ella suggested to continue further and suggested to go for a swim. Mr. G immediately stood up, calling for us to join him, and ran out the door. Ella said that if we have swimsuits, she will show us our changing room. We got up and followed Ella into a large double room, closing the door behind us. In the room, we changed into swimsuits. I chose regular swimming trunks and Aaron chose a revealing pink bikini. I expressed my opinion that the situation was too exaggerated and asked who Aaron was trying to impress. She replied that she just wanted to look good, mentioning Ella's beauty. I objected, saying that she was no less beautiful, although she did not like my tone. Aaron refrained from answering, and we went downstairs. Ella was wearing an electric blue bikini about the same size as Aaron's. They both seemed charming. We went to the beach on the south side, walking along a wooden path. Mr. G, I was already in the water and swimming behind a protective embankment. Aaron expressed a reluctance to sail so far, which was shared by Ella, who shuddered. But despite this, I plunged in the water, swam to Mr. G, who uses a crawl style, and joined him. He was an experienced swimmer for his size and could easily compete with me because I had an aquatic figure. We swam until he got tired, and I followed him to the shore. As I got closer, a big wave knocked him off his feet, and I picked him up. He cleared his throat and pulled out of his arms, and we walked to the shore. His legs felt like cotton wool, most likely from the fact that he had overworked himself in our swimming competition. Recovering quickly, he pulled away, saying that everything was fine and the wave caught him by surprise. Approaching the sunbathing women, I asked who wanted to swim. Ella immediately stood up, rising up, and her swimsuit top slipped slightly. We both ran to the water. Erin refused, so I went swimming with Ella. I was impressed by her swimming abilities compared to Mr. G, having been swimming nearby for some time. She offered to turn around, and I did it. Intrigued by her figure, I let her come off 4 meters ahead, watching her from the side. She turned over, floated on her back, and her breasts gently swayed in the water. An absolutely amazing woman. Thanks to my ability to swim on my back, I joined her, swimming beside her until she declared, "I've had enough," and returned to the shore. I paused for a moment to look at her from behind. After surfacing from the water, Erin and Mr. G were not in sight, but attention turned to my tight-fitting swimming trunks. She joked about me being Superman, and I laughed, suggesting one way for her to check. She approached me but stopped, saying that we couldn't do it here no matter how much she wanted it. With that, she turned and ran away. On land, she couldn't compete with my speed in the water, and I easily caught up with her, and we went to the veranda. Our companions were missing, and I wondered if this had already happened. I asked about my profession, asked if I really write. After confirming this, I explained how I strive for credibility in Rick's actions. Elle stared at me, momentarily weakening my resolve, but as expected, she restored it. She looked confident. I resolutely told Elle to leave us alone, emphasizing my family status and expressing a desire to preserve it. I asked her not to go any further. Elle laughed, calling me an awkward writer. I was muttering, "Oh my God," and offered to check on Erin and Mr. G. I asked if it mattered to her, and she expressed interest, to which I replied, "Oh yes, please." Then I explained to Elle that I wanted her to understand that I would not sleep with her on the weekend. I explained that no matter what Erin decided, if it came to that, I would leave. I admitted that I would probably regret for a long time what I had just said, and smiled at the same time. When Elle warned me that she was not so easily shaken off, she entered the house. I waited a few minutes before following her. When I went upstairs to change, I didn't find anyone. However, upon entering our room, I heard the shower running, which stopped abruptly when I realized this. Without a vote, Erin opened the door, wrapped in a towel. She screamed when she saw me and asked if Elle had already gotten to me. I assured her that she didn't get the ale, and explained that I wouldn't go with her. I expressed the hope that Erin would not go with Mr. G either, reminding her that Elle did not go. I explained what they were doing when we were swimming with Elle. Erin told me that Mr. G showed her around, pointing to the swimming pool, tennis court, and gym downstairs. She stressed that there was no connection with the relationship. I confessed my belief that Mr. G would not be involved in such risky behavior, given that they did not know how long we would be away, and I suspected that they were watching us during the voyage. Erin agreed, describing Mr. G as a gentleman. However, she expressed her fear that sooner or later he would come for me. I acknowledged the possibility of this, and added that I would come for her too. Erin smiled, saying that it wasn't very comforting, but assured me that she wouldn't give up, stressing that I shouldn't do it either. We discussed our plans for the evening, and Erin stated that we have time for love after drinks and snacks at 5 o'clock. She threw off the towel, and I admitted that I was still nervous about the ale. We went into passionate privacy, realizing only after the windows were open. Erin pointed out that it didn't matter, saying they were married. Looking out the window, Elle was sitting on a chaise lawn about 6 meters away from us. She looked up, smiled, waved, and then reached for her shorts. I moved away from the window. Erin noticed my renewed excitement and fixed her gaze on me. After glancing out the window, she remained fascinated for a while. There was a groan from outside. Erin turned to me, crying out, "Oh my God, Dunny, forget about yourself. She can take me away. I can give up on you. I will not give up." Erin teased that I needed to beg Elle to back off, claiming that this was the only chance I had. I mentioned that I had already tried asking, but it didn't seem to work. I assumed that Plato had given Ella a task to have me. The situation seemed strange to me, but I admitted that I was interested in it. I promised Erin that I would not succumb to Elle's advances, expressing gratitude for her help. Erin noticed that I was still in a state of arousal and suggested that we could meet intimately every 2 hours to ease the situation. We went down to the main room in loose clothes, shorts and a collared shirt for me, and a dress with loose hair and high heels for Erin. Mr. Dew was already there, gulping beer. He asked about our swimming with Elle, and I replied positively, praising her swimming abilities. Mr. G suggested that I call him Plato, appreciating the well-known name. He mentioned that his father likes to read about Plato. Elle joined us, also in a dress and heels. The dress seemed modest, but it looked everything but modest on her. I felt a little insecure with Erin, realizing that this was part of the game. Elle tried to succeed Erin, and Erin Erosites tried to prove herself by winning Plato's attention. I approached Erin, putting my hand on her shoulder. Plato told us about the available drinks and snacks, preferring pretzels. To continue the conversation, he ate alone. The four of us chatted for a while, and then Ella took me to show me around the house, which I found impressive. I asked if Plato used the gym, and Elle confirmed, mentioning his preference for weightlifting. She pointed to the bench with a barbell and described it as heavy. I demonstrated a few swings with the barbell, with Ella watching intently from above. Ella mentioned that Plato only did 3 reps before resting, and as she spoke, she began breathing heavily. I decided to lift the barbell and did 8 more reps. Plato then commented on Ella's strengths, suggesting that her role for the weekend should be to seduce me so Plato could take care of Erin. Ella acknowledged that similar tasks had occurred before, expressing her willingness to finish the job, even if it wasn't usually very pleasant. She playfully asked if I would stop if she started begging. I was genuinely serious in my response, but she perceived it as a joke, stating that she wouldn't stop but would enjoy seeing me beg. Elle then ascended the stairs, and I waited for my hardness to subside before standing up. The 3 of them huddled together in the living room and conversed. When I entered, they fell silent, and Plato suggested I have something to drink, maybe beer. I glanced at the bar, walked over, extracted a bottle of Corona, and popped it open. The others had wine, and we chatted for a bit. I then asked if they had finished discussing their plot, or if I should leave, prompting an awkward silence. Ella silently observed the others, mainly Erin, who looked at Plato. Plato then stated that there were no secrets. At that moment, Simon came in and declared that dinner was served, leading us into the dining room, where dishes were arranged on the buffet table. It was a familial serving style. We sat at one end of a large table. They poured water, but I opted for my beer and refrained from water. Breaking the conversation, Plato addressed the tense situation I had created, and we engaged in friendly discussions about politics and baseball. Plato was a Yankees fan. Erin and I rooted for the Orioles and Nationals. Ellie liked the Pirates, being from Jonestown. Simon served dessert tiramisu. I skipped mine. Plato seemed to notice. Erin insisted that Plato not skip dessert, encouraging him to eat. Plato commented on keeping his waist in check and mentioned Erin having no fat in her body, claiming to have observed her while swimming and noting her preference for beer over water. In response to Erin expressing a lack of trust, Plato dismissed the idea of being medicated with something forbidden, considering it crazy. He encouraged me to eat and drink while pushing a glass of water and tiramisu towards me. I smiled and offered the same to Plato. However, he sat with a stony face and instructed Simon to clear the table. Simon noticed the change in the water and dessert arrangement, picked up my untouched glass of water and tiramisu, and carried them away. Elle suggested moving to the courtyard for music and dancing. Erin and Plato remained silent. I stood up and extended my hand to Elle, leading her to the patio. Once there, she remarked on my apparent suspicion of Plato slipping something into the food and water. I acknowledged the possibility, but noted that Plato hadn't taken either himself and had them removed by Simon. The others joined us, and soft music started playing. I approached Erin, took her by the elbow, and led her away from Plato into the open area. We danced, and although Erin was initially shy, she eventually relaxed. Pressing herself close to me, she whispered, "I love you, Donnie, always. I love you too, Erin." We continued dancing. The music concluded, and we joined Plato and Elle at a table. Soon the music resumed, and Elle rose, offering her hand to me. She led me to the dance floor. We danced. Elle might have been the world's most captivating distraction, with her sweet, subtle fragrance and the contours of her body. She entranced me, eliciting immediate delight, as she always did. Observing Plato's hands on Erin's backside, I noted that she didn't push them away. Breaking away from Elle, I walked the short distance to Erin and Plato, standing there and observing them. Erin noticed and tried to move away from Plato, who persisted in keeping his hands on her. She gently pushed him on the chest, expressing a desire to avoid problems. Plato released her, but took her hand, guiding her back to the table. Elle returned after me, and we sat down, with her sitting very close to me. Erin held Plato's hand as they sat side by side. Plato expressed disappointment in me, claiming that Elle was a fantastic lover and could provide me with one of the most powerful and delightful experiences of my life. He accused me of denying her this opportunity. I asserted that I had a wife and wouldn't entertain the idea of a trade, bringing us back to the initial discussion, turning to Aaron. I stated that it was either him or me with no intermediary options. She withdrew her hand from his but looked at me and suggested that it was only for the weekend, and on Monday everything would be back to normal. She asked if I couldn't have some fun with Ella for the time being. Scrutinizing her, I questioned if she was serious and if I should take it as a yes or no, even if it meant it would be over between us. I firmly stated my refusal with a simple no. Despite not understanding why it should imply anything, I made it clear that I wouldn't entertain the idea. I extended my hand to her and she took it. Pulling her towards me, I gave her the hottest kiss I could muster, running my hands up and down her body. Afterward, I pulled away, tears welling up in my eyes. I exhaled the words that nearly crushed me, stating, "The mere thought that you would agree to be with this guy means it's all over between us. It's done." I turned and headed for the stairs. She cried out, "No, Dunny, no." I reached the top of the stairs, grabbed my previously packed bag, and left through the back fire escape. I made the call and ran into the darkness, sobbing. While running, I still heard screams. About 20 minutes later, I heard a plane. It landed near the southern dock, and my friend Todd Jacobs swam up to me. Approaching him with Plato and Simon emerging behind me, Plato exclaimed that there was no escape and suggested I stay to calm my wife down. Charging at me, I reached the pier. Plato, uncontrollable and unfit for a fight, splashed around in the water, shouting about firing me. Boarding the plane with Todd at the controls, we flew to a small lake near Dulles. A car was waiting for me there, and I paid Todd for the service. Heading home to Alexandria, the road was dark and desolate. Our house, too, was dimly lit. Upon entering, I surveyed the surroundings. Photos of us in happier times, pictures of our relatives. Shocked, I sat in a chair, gazing into space, and that's how I drifted off to sleep. At 8 in the morning, a car's sound outside woke me up. I peered out and saw Erin stepping out of a rental car. She carried her bag to the door, unlocked it, and went inside. I stood and observed her, and she stood motionless, gazing at me. She looked awful, probably no better than me. She expressed in her entire life she had never messed up like that and vowed never to do it again, not wanting to lose me. I shrugged in response. I confronted Erin, asking her what she thought would happen when she decided to let Plato use her. I questioned if she thought I happened when she decided to let Plato use her. I questioned if she thought I wouldn't notice because of Elle. She admitted to being stupid and not anticipating the consequences. I inquired if Erin and Plato had set everything up, and she looked down, confessing that Plato suggested there might be a substitution when they got there. She foresaw it in advance, thinking she would say no, but I surprised her by agreeing with the condition that I go with Elle. She mentioned how much I seemed to desire Elle, and that the whole experience was intended as a sideshow to rekindle our marriage. I smiled in response. I questioned Erin about why she thought Plato would be better than me. She explained that he excited her, being older and stronger, and suggested that he knew what to do to win her over. She clarified that she never thought he would be better than me, just different. Concerned about the future, I asked how I could be sure this wouldn't happen again, considering there are many guys like Plato in the world, and he's still around. Erin insisted that she didn't mean to cheat and believed everything was right in front of me. She thought I would agree now since I had turned down Elle. Expressing my disappointment, I remarked that she wasn't the woman I met and married, emphasizing that the woman I knew wouldn't succumb to the advances of another guy. Erin pleaded to see what happens next and suggested we continue enjoying great lovemaking, while acknowledging that we both missed it. She stood up and removed all her clothes, prompting me to think about turning away but ultimately not doing so. She led me upstairs. The only constant in our relationship, always present and likely to remain, is our complete coital compatibility. I let her go home, and 10 years later, I picked up our kids from the school bus, Jessica, who is 8, and Robert, who is 6, Helen, who is 3 and doesn't attend school yet. As a stay-at-home writer, I had help and the opportunity to write. It took over a year before I trusted Erin enough to let her stop taking the pills, and when she did, our lovemaking life flourished. The idea of her getting pregnant excited us greatly. I closed my contract with the previous publisher, and Sally and I moved on to something else. The first book I wrote was about adventures on an island, closely mirroring reality. It sold a considerable number of copies, securing a movie deal that included my 3 previous books. Plato couldn't complain about half-truths in the new book, where he was cast as Socrates and met a fitting fate. Erin now owns 2 stores that generate some income, while I earn substantially. Before fully accepting her back, Erin signed a postnuptial agreement, ensuring fidelity from both of us. With the school year underway, as I drove the 2 older kids home, a small red sports car arrived at our entrance. A remarkable pair of legs emerged, followed by the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen. The children excitedly ran up to her shouting, "Aunt Helen." She hugged them and fussed around while young Helen welcomed her at the door. I poured her favorite drink, seltzer, and informed her that Erin would arrive soon. I mentioned preparing a high-calorie salad, concluding with, "But that's a completely different story. I'm Donald, aged 56, sharing my life for the first time. I'm married to Lauren, aged 45, and we have a 13-year-old daughter." This recount is from a few months ago. My wife, our daughter, and I were in Istanbul, with a large group of 3 families, totaling around 16 people. As our trip concluded, we gathered at Istanbul Airport for our collective return to Chicago. With an 11-hour flight ahead, we conducted a group accounting session. Unexpectedly, our flight faced a 6-hour delay. Utilizing the time, we all headed to the lounge, finding it surprisingly empty. We were the sole occupants, engaging in lively conversations, sharing smiles, and reliving tales of Turkey and its delectable cuisine. Taking a brief smoke break, I returned after 15 minutes, walking towards my wife. Spotting a slender figure near her, my heart raced, not due to nicotine, but an intense surge of emotions. The closer I got, the more my heart raced, transporting me back 2 decades to a moment of holding hands in a church, saying "I do," and embarking on a shared life. Suddenly, I snapped back to the lounge, informing my wife of my need for fresh air, before walking out without acknowledging the woman talking to her. Outside, memories flooded back, bringing me to moments with Maria in Columbus, Georgia, by the Chattahoochee River. Closing my eyes, I revisited our love story from college to marriage. Maria in my life has been the object of my affection since our college days. We married, moved in together, and embarked on a promising married life. My journalism career and her role as a financial expert led to frequent travels, yet we maintained our connection. Maria's sparkling eyes brightened my days, and when at home, our time was filled with love and delicious meals she prepared. The initial 2 years of marriage were seamless, with no signs of trouble in paradise. We postponed having children to establish ourselves professionally. Our only challenge was the limited time we could spend together due to our demanding jobs. Travel became a constant, even for Maria. The sole point of contention was my mother, living alone and desiring frequent visits. My wife harbored a dislike for her, and although I never probed the reasons, I endeavored to keep them apart, maintaining a delicate balance between them. In January, my mother became ill, and I informed my wife that I would care for her. She wasn't pleased, since I had just returned from covering a story in Iraq. We argued because she wanted me to hire help for my mother, instead of going myself. I explained that my mother is old, and this might be the last time I see her alive. Maria was unhappy, but I ignored it. 3 days later, my mother died in my arms, leaving me devastated. After her burial, I returned home, and Maria once again complained about my mother. I was shocked and couldn't understand her point. She caused so much trouble, insisting that the deceased person should have been in the hospital from the start. I remained silent, trying to comprehend it all. "Why is Maria criticizing a deceased person?" I retorted, but she shut me down, saying the person won't respond, so I should zip it. That led to a week of silence between us. To break the ice, I took her out for dinner, and that night, we shared in closeness moment. Things seemed better, but I had to go to Afghanistan to cover the historic Silk Road. In my absence, Maria earned promotions and a higher salary. When I returned 2 weeks later, everything had changed. Coming home, Maria greeted me warmly, but during dinner, she seemed tense. She said we needed changes in our lives. "What changes do you want?" I asked. She expressed the challenges of my frequent and prolonged absences, longing for my touch. Maria gave me 2 options: find a job near her or find her a job to travel with me. Torn but relieved by her honesty, I agreed to find another job, closing the topic. The next morning, I resigned and got a local job at the TV channel, even though it paid less. When I told Maria about the 30% reduction in my salary, she was angry. I explained the trade-off for a stationary job, but she resisted, upset about the decreased contribution and its impact on her lifestyle. It was a tough situation, but I was committed to making it work. We continued like that, and over the next 3 months, things deteriorated. We talked less and nights lacked lovemaking. Her demeanor shifted from a loving wife to a nagging presence. She found faults in everything, and not a single day passed without going to bed angry. It got so bad that one night she asked me to stop breathing as my breath disturbed her sleep. A few days later, my phone went missing, prompting me to use my wife's phone to call mine. Surprisingly, her phone was locked, which was unusual since I never had a lock on mine, and she never did either, as far as I knew. This raised suspicions about why her phone had a lock. Was she hiding something? On a Thursday night, she returned from a late-night party with her office friends, appearing disheveled in a black dress with no lipstick. When I asked what happened, she explained she danced too much and was tired. Helping her to the bedroom, I noticed a bruise on her left thigh, and she wasn't wearing panties, which was out of character for her. Unable to sleep that night, I became determined to uncover the truth. As a journalist, my instinct was to investigate. Although I knew many people who could assist, I preferred handling it on my own. 3 weeks later, I found myself outside Motel 6 on Victory Drive at 2:30 p.m., having tracked Maria's car there. Approaching room 12, I unlocked the door and discovered a monitor displaying my wife in a compromising position with her blonde lover, Steve Bauman, an old college foe who had always admired Maria. My tears had ceased, leaving me emotionally numb. The pain in my heart was overwhelming after 3 weeks of relentless investigation. Breaking the door and acting impulsively crossed my mind, but I had promised the motel manager no violence, a condition for his assistance in setting up recording devices in the room. Despite the manager's restriction, violence remained an option outside the motel. I left the motel with a smile, got into my car, and parked behind Steve's Mustang. Armed with an ice pick, I punctured all 4 tires, patiently waiting for what would unfold next. After an hour, Steve emerged, holding Maria by her exposed waist, an image I captured on camera. I returned my camera to its place and stepped out of my truck, approaching them directly. Maria remained silent, appearing as if she had seen a ghost, while Steve wore a sinister grin, reveling in taking another man's wife. Keeping his grip on her waist, I observed Maria's feeble attempt to free herself. Upon noticing me, she greeted and questioned my unexpected presence. I stared back, not uttering a word. In an effort to explain, she insisted that she could clarify, emphasizing that it wasn't what I might be thinking. In response to her explanation, my retort came with my gaze fixed on Steve's hand on her waist, stating that I was not thinking, just observing. With a smile, I made a remark, suggesting that Steve might have taken away my wife. Maria denied any wrongdoing, explaining that their interaction was part of a meeting they had at that location. My response was cynical, pointing out that the meeting seemed to involve unconventional activities. I asked if Steve had satisfied her, prompting a gasp from Maria as she recalled her recent words. A warning followed, stating that all her actions were on video and would be sent to her office, reaching friends, family, Linda, and her dad. Steve interjected, shouting a plea to leave Linda out of the situation. Dismissing his request, I added that Linda had every right to be involved since her husband was involved with my wife, creating a lot of unfinished business. Maintaining a smile, I continued, mentioning that Linda had already witnessed their actions and was eagerly awaiting the video copy to file for divorce. I suggested that in their situation, preparing to say goodbye to their beloved Mustang might be wise, as it would be sold to settle the lawsuit. Furious, Steve lunged at me, a big mistake, considering my years of travel to places like Iraq and Afghanistan. I had been among warriors and fighters, learning a few tricks along the way. Blocking his right hand, ducking forward, I landed a left on his chin, causing him to drop like a bag of potatoes. He struggled to get up, wobbling towards me, only to receive an uppercut that left him unconscious. Maria stood there horrified, and I instructed her to get in, wobbling towards me, only to receive an uppercut that left him unconscious. Maria stood there horrified, and I instructed her to get in the truck. We didn't go home. Instead, we headed straight to my lawyer. Ignoring Maria's inquiries, I gestured for her silence. In the lawyer's office, we were directed to the large conference room and took seats on opposite sides of the table. The atmosphere was tense until Ron Freeman, my lawyer, entered and handed an envelope to Maria. He explained the terms, stating that the divorce had been filed based on irreconcilable differences. There was no shared property and the legal transfer of his mother's house hadn't occurred, so she couldn't claim it. He informed her that she would receive half the money from the joint account, which she could withdraw since she earned more. There was no alimony. Ron concluded the discussion and left the room. Maria clutched the envelope and directed her gaze at me. Breaking the silence, I warned her that if she contested the divorce, I'd alter the grounds to infidelity, ensuring widespread exposure of her infidelity on all social media platforms. I threatened to send the evidence to her office, leading to termination, and vowed to follow her if she fled to another city, making her life a perpetual fear of tarnished reputation. After she nodded in understanding, I stood up and left. Maria, however, spoke up, questioning if I wanted to know why she acted as she did. She explained that I desired a lifestyle she couldn't provide, seeking luxury without understanding the sacrifices. According to her, the blonde lover fulfilled those desires temporarily, but he was already married and merely seeking cheap entertainment. Maria questioned how long such happiness would last, anticipating a cycle of seeking new lovers. She concluded by pointing out my present situation with only an envelope in hand. Her parting words wished me a nice day. Months later, I encountered her in court during the divorce proceedings. We never exchanged words, only receiving the court's orders granting the divorce. Steve, her lover, never filed a complaint against me, as cameras in the parking lot would have shown him as the aggressor. I sent Linda the videos and evidence of Steve's infidelity, leading to their divorce, and rumors of Steve facing consequences from Linda's brothers. Linda's father, connected and vengeful, wanted to punish Maria, but Linda intervened. I changed jobs and eventually returned to my old position in a different city. Life moved forward, and at Istanbul Airport, I found myself a chief journalist with ample wealth, a faithful wife, and a wonderful daughter. Back in the airport lounge, my wife continued conversing with Maria for hours. Staying away, I observed their interaction, concerned about Maria's intentions. Later, I confirmed our departure time with airport officials. Boarding the flight after a challenging wait, I sat beside my wife, who displayed a different smile. Curious, I inquired about her discussion with Maria. She revealed she was expressing gratitude to Maria for her mistakes, which led her to find me. Surprised, I asked if Maria had disclosed this information. My wife clarified that Maria never mentioned me but shared court orders and investigative materials found in the attic. When I asked about their conversation, my wife downplayed it, stating she listened to Maria's regrets about missing her ex-husband and her desire for a life like mine. I smiled, closed my eyes, and settled back into my chair.